"They will not get away with this. Not on my watch." The words echoed with unmistakable resolve, a warning to adversaries both foreign and domestic. Those late-night words from President Trump reverberated through the White House and across the globe. News outlets scrambled to interpret his tone, while allies and rivals alike braced for the fallout. The source of his anger? A bold, unprecedented move by the European Union. A direct economic assault on American industry. The EU's decision sent a clear message. They were ready to challenge the US on the world stage. This wasn't a quiet policy shift. It was a calculated strike, sending shockwaves through global markets and leaving Washington scrambling. Investors watched in disbelief as markets tumbled and uncertainty spread. Trump saw the EU's action as more than a trade dispute. It was a personal challenge to his America First doctrine. For him, it was about national pride and the promise he made to his supporters. His public statements became daily events. Outrage, threats, and promises of retaliation. The world watched as his rhetoric grew sharper, his resolve more visible. He vowed to protect American workers, painting the EU as a hostile force determined to undermine US prosperity. Factories became rallying points, symbols of the struggle ahead. The stage was set for a historic confrontation, the culmination of years of simmering tensions. Diplomats on both sides prepared for a showdown that could reshape alliances. The president's team worked around the clock, searching for a powerful counterpunch. Every option was on the table, and the stakes had never been higher. Would Trump impose crippling tariffs? The threat alone sent ripples through international trade networks. Pull out of trade agreements? The possibility loomed, raising fears of a global economic rift. The world watched, breath held. Every headline, every tweet, every rumor was dissected for clues about what would come next. The president's fury was real, reflecting a genuine crisis behind the scenes. Advisors worried about the consequences, but Trump's determination was unwavering. Senior officials locked themselves in emergency meetings, racing to grasp the scale of the EU's move. The pressure was mounting with every passing hour. Trump, cornered but defiant, demanded an overwhelming response. He would not allow America to appear weak on the world stage. The message: the United States would not be bullied. The world would soon see just how far he was willing to go. For Trump, this was a battle for economic dominance, and he was determined to win, whatever the cost. The next move would define not just his presidency, but the future of global power. The EU's move was devastating in its simplicity, a single decision that sent shockwaves across the Atlantic. Brussels announced a sweeping regulatory blockade, abruptly halting $66 billion in annual U.S. goods and services. Ships were turned away, contracts suspended, and business as usual came to a grinding halt. This wasn't a tariff or a slow escalation, it was a full stop, a blackout designed to inflict maximum pain on key U.S. sectors overnight, leaving factories and warehouses eerily silent. The EU justified its drastic action as retaliation for what it called unfair American trade practices, especially the new U.S. environmental levies that had angered European leaders and businesses alike. By leveraging its regulatory power, the EU froze contracts, severed supply chains, and wiped out billions in revenue overnight. Industries from autos to aviation felt the sting immediately. The $66 billion figure was no accident. It matched, almost to the dollar, the damage the EU claimed from US policies. It was a calculated, symbolic eye for an eye meant to send a message. European leaders, usually measured and diplomatic, now stood united and aggressive. They were gambling that this unprecedented shock would force the US back to the negotiating table. The announcement sent tremors through global markets. Stocks shuddered, currencies wobbled, and investors everywhere braced for impact, fearing a wider economic fallout. For US companies, this meant real jobs and real orders vanished in an instant. Workers were sent home, and uncertainty rippled through boardrooms and shop floors alike. The EU had weaponized its market access, turning America's export power into a sudden vulnerability, and showing just how interconnected and fragile the global economy could be. The message was unmistakable. Access to Europe is a privilege, not a right, and it could be revoked at a moment's notice. The world watched, waiting for America's next move, as headlines blared and analysts debated the consequences of this high-stakes standoff. The economic standoff had begun, and no one could predict how far the fallout would spread. For the American auto industry, the EU's blockade was a gut punch, swift, unexpected, and deeply destabilizing. Shipments of high-end vehicles, especially electric and muscle cars, were halted mid-journey, stranded at European ports, unable to reach eager buyers. Factories in Michigan, Ohio, and South Carolina abruptly stopped production, their European orders frozen, assembly lines eerily quiet. The impact rippled down the supply chain. Thousands of smaller suppliers, many family-owned, saw orders canceled overnight, leaving shelves and workbenches empty. Job losses began immediately, hitting workers on the line, engineers, logistics teams, and marketers. The sense of uncertainty spread quickly. The dream of a manufacturing resurgence, central to Trump's platform, was suddenly in jeopardy, as the industry's future hung in the balance. The workers he'd promised to protect were now on the front lines of a trade war, facing layoffs and an uncertain tomorrow. Beyond immediate losses, the shutdown posed a long-term threat to America's industrial heartland and its communities. American automakers investing billions in electric vehicles risked losing ground to European and Asian rivals, jeopardizing years of innovation. Being locked out of Europe meant missing out on innovation, scale, and the chance to shape the future of mobility. The halt wasn't just about today's sales, it was about tomorrow's opportunities lost and the erosion of America's competitive edge. The cost of this trade war was already being counted in jobs, livelihoods, and the uncertain futures of thousands of American families. The American aviation sector, another pillar of U.S. industry, was hit just as hard. The EU's move froze sales of American-made aircraft and critical components, halting multi-billion-dollar deals. European airlines, major customers for U.S. manufacturers, were forced to cancel orders and payments. The result? Immediate furloughs, hiring freezes, and looming layoffs across the country. The crisis rippled through the entire ecosystem, from engineers to machinists to technicians. This wasn't the first US-EU aviation clash, but it was the most severe, blocking entire aircraft, not just imposing tariffs. The move threatened decades of transatlantic cooperation in aviation safety and regulation. The long-term risk: if Europe stays closed, future U.S. aircraft projects could be jeopardized, ceding ground to Airbus. Innovation could stall, and America's dominance in the skies could fade. This was more than a financial hit. It was a threat to national pride and economic strength. The aviation standoff had global consequences. President Trump's response was immediate and explosive. He launched a rhetorical offensive, labeling EU leaders as globalist bullies and vowing swift retaliation. His message: the EU would regret challenging the United States. Behind the scenes, Trump's team drew up a list of European goods, luxury cars, wines, cheeses, to target with new tariffs. The strategy inflicted pain and sow division within the EU, hoping some nations would pressure Brussels to back down. Trump also ordered a review of all federal contracts with major European corporations, threatening giants like Airbus and Siemens. The conflict now extended beyond trade, touching national security and industrial policy. All ongoing trade talks were suspended. Trump demanded the EU lift its blockade before any negotiations resumed. This hardline stance was a gamble, one that risked a deeper, more damaging conflict. The administration bet the US could outlast the EU's pain threshold. The world braced for escalation. Beyond the headlines, ordinary people bore the brunt of the trade war. In Ohio, a factory worker making transmissions for export to Europe was sent home, his future uncertain. In Kansas, small machine shops lost orders overnight, forcing painful layoffs. The ripple effect devastated local economies. Diners, shops, and services all suffered. Across the Atlantic, European workers and businesses faced similar fears as U.S. retaliation hit their exports. A French winemaker, a German car worker, both watched their livelihoods threatened by tariffs and blockades. For consumers, the conflict meant higher prices and fewer choices on both continents. The trade war acted as a hidden tax, disrupting the global web of commerce. In the end, it was workers and families who paid the highest price. The human cost of economic conflict was impossible to ignore. This crisis didn't come out of nowhere. It's the latest in a long line of US-EU trade battles. For decades, the two powers have clashed over everything from beef to steel to aircraft subsidies. The Trump era marked a turning point, with America-first policies and a preference for unilateral action. Tariffs on steel and aluminum, EU retaliation on American goods. Each round deepened mistrust. The aircraft subsidy dispute, a marathon legal fight, fueled resentment and set the stage for escalation. What's different now? The EU's wholesale blockade is a radical departure from targeted tariffs. It bypasses the WTO and signals a new, more aggressive form of economic statecraft. Europe is less willing to play by old rules, especially as the US abandons them. The result: the transatlantic relationship is now in uncharted, perilous territory. The stakes have never been higher. The trade war's impact rippled far beyond autos and aviation. Tech companies lost European sales, banks faced frozen assets, and shipping firms saw business dry up. Dock workers in U.S. ports lost hours. Supply chains everywhere were disrupted. For consumers, prices soared. French wine, Italian shoes, American electronics all cost more. On both sides of the Atlantic, choice shrank and inflation rose. Businesses put expansion plans on hold, wary of new tariffs and uncertainty. The climate of fear and instability slowed economic growth. In this conflict, there were no winners, only collateral damage. The US-EU trade war is a high-stakes gamble with global consequences. The $66 billion shutdown and Trump's promised retaliation have pushed the partnership to the brink. The immediate future: more escalation, more pain for workers, businesses, and consumers. One scenario: a prolonged trade war, deep recession, and a fractured global economy, a lose-lose outcome. Another: enough pain forces both sides back to the table, but trust will take years to rebuild. The crisis exposes the fragility of global economic ties, interconnected yet vulnerable. The actions of the US and EU risk unraveling decades of cooperation. The world watches, hoping for statesmanship over brinkmanship. Millions of livelihoods hang in the balance. The outcome will shape the global order for years to come. The stakes have never been higher.